A series of explosions has rocked Iran in recent months, sending shockwaves through the Middle East and raising fears of a wider conflict. The blasts, which have targeted sensitive military and industrial sites, have exposed Iran's vulnerability and fueled speculation about the perpetrators. While no one has claimed responsibility, suspicion has fallen on Israel, which has vowed to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. The explosions come at a time of heightened tensions between Iran and the West, following the collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal and the imposition of crippling U.S. sanctions. The attacks have also highlighted the ongoing shadow war between Iran and Israel, which has been waged for decades through covert operations, cyber attacks, and proxy conflicts. Iran has sought to downplay the impact of the explosions, but the sheer number and scale of the incidents have raised concerns about the country's security. The attacks have also sparked fears of a wider conflict, particularly if Iran retaliates against Israel or its allies. As the international community watches with bated breath, the explosions in Iran serve as a stark reminder of the volatile and unpredictable nature of the Middle East. The situation remains fluid, and the potential for miscalculation and escalation remains high.
The recent wave of explosions in Iran has targeted a range of facilities, including military bases, nuclear sites, and industrial plants. The attacks have varied in scale and sophistication, but all have had a significant impact on Iran's security and economy. One of the most high-profile incidents occurred in April 2024, when explosions were reported near the Natanz nuclear facility. While Iran initially downplayed the damage, satellite images later revealed the extent of the destruction. The attack, which was widely attributed to Israel, was seen as a major setback to Iran's nuclear program. In February 2024, a series of explosions targeted gas pipelines in multiple provinces across Iran. The blasts, which caused significant damage to infrastructure, were blamed on terrorist groups, but no one claimed responsibility. Experts have suggested that the attacks were part of a campaign of covert sabotage aimed at undermining Iran's economy. In January 2024, twin bombings at a memorial for Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Kerman killed at least 90 people. The Islamic State, ISIS, claimed responsibility for the attack, but some Iranian hardliners accused Israel of involvement. The explosions have continued into 2025, with a massive blast rocking the Shahid Raja'i port near Bandar Abbas in April. The explosion, which was caused by a fire that spread to containers storing flammable materials, killed at least 4 people and injured hundreds more.
The explosions in Iran are just the latest chapter in a long-running shadow war between Israel and Iran. The two countries have been locked in a bitter rivalry for decades, fueled by ideological differences, geopolitical competition, and Iran's nuclear ambitions. Israel views Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat and has repeatedly vowed to prevent Tehran from developing nuclear weapons. To this end, Israel has engaged in a multifaceted campaign to sabotage Iran's nuclear program, including cyber attacks, assassinations of nuclear scientists, and covert operations. Iran, for its part, has accused Israel of waging a terrorist war against it and has vowed to retaliate for any attacks. Tehran has also provided support to militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, which have fought wars with Israel. The shadow war between Israel and Iran has escalated in recent years, as tensions over Iran's nuclear program have grown. The collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal and the imposition of U.S. sanctions have further exacerbated tensions, creating a climate of mistrust and hostility. At the heart of the Israel-Iran shadow war lies Iran's nuclear program. Israel views Iran's nuclear ambitions as an existential threat and has repeatedly vowed to prevent Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons capability. Iran insists that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes, but Israel and many in the international community remain skeptical. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has reported that Iran has enriched uranium to levels far beyond what is needed for civilian purposes, raising concerns that Tehran is moving closer to developing nuclear weapons. The 2015 nuclear deal, which was negotiated between Iran and 6 world powers, including the United States, was intended to curb Iran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. However, the deal collapsed in 2018 after the Trump administration withdrew the United States and reimposed sanctions. Since the collapse of the nuclear deal, Iran has steadily increased its nuclear activities, raising fears that it is moving closer to developing nuclear weapons. Israel has warned that it will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons and has hinted at the possibility of military action to prevent it.
Iran has so far responded to the explosions with a mixture of defiance and restraint. While Tehran has vowed to retaliate for any attacks on its soil, it has also sought to avoid a wider conflict with Israel or the United States. Publicly, Iran has downplayed the impact of the explosions, portraying itself as a strong and resilient nation. However, behind the scenes, there are signs that Tehran is taking the attacks seriously. Iran has reportedly tightened security at its nuclear sites and other sensitive facilities. There are also reports that Iran has been conducting cyber attacks against Israeli targets in retaliation for the explosions. However, Iran faces a delicate balancing act. While it needs to demonstrate strength and deter further attacks, it also cannot afford to be seen as weak or indecisive. A full-blown conflict with Israel would be disastrous for Iran, particularly at a time when its economy is already reeling from.
Section 6. The Domestic Front, a Pressure Cooker. The explosions in Iran have not only heightened geopolitical tensions, but also increased pressure on the Iranian government domestically. The attacks have exposed vulnerabilities in Iran's security apparatus and fueled public anger and frustration. Ordinary Iranians are already grappling with a dire economic situation, exacerbated by U.S. sanctions and government mismanagement. The explosions, which have disrupted critical infrastructure and caused economic damage, have only added to their woes. The Iranian government's response to the explosions, a mix of defiance and restraint, has also drawn criticism from both hardliners and moderates. Hardliners have accused the government of being too weak in the face of Israeli aggression, while moderates have urged caution and warned against escalating tensions. The explosions have also fueled public anger over corruption and mismanagement within the government. Many Iranians believe that the government is more interested in pursuing its ideological agenda than in addressing their everyday concerns.
Section 7. The international community's response. The international community has responded to the explosions in Iran with a mixture of concern and condemnation. The attacks have raised fears of a wider conflict in the Middle East and underscored the urgent need for diplomatic efforts to reduce tensions. The United States, while stopping short of directly blaming Iran for the attacks, has expressed support for Israel's right to defend itself. The Biden administration has also called on Iran to return to compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal. European countries have condemned the attacks and urged all parties to exercise restraint. They have also expressed concern about the potential for escalation and the impact of the explosions on regional stability. The United Nations has called for a thorough investigation into the explosions and urged all parties to avoid any actions that could further escalate tensions. Section 8. The Road Ahead. Uncertainty and Escalation. The explosions in Iran have injected a dangerous level of uncertainty into an already volatile region. The risk of miscalculation and escalation remains high, as both Israel and Iran feel compelled to respond to perceived threats. Looking ahead, there are several potential flashpoints to watch. One is the possibility of further cyber attacks, as both Israel and Iran have demonstrated their cyber capabilities. Another is the risk of proxy conflict, as Iran could activate its allies in Lebanon, Syria, or Yemen to strike at Israeli or U.S. targets. The situation is further complicated by the lack of diplomatic channels between Iran and Israel, as well as the uncertain future of the 2015 nuclear deal. Without a diplomatic breakthrough, the risk of a wider conflict will continue to grow. The international community has a critical role to play in preventing further escalation. Diplomatic efforts must focus on reducing tensions, restarting negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, and finding ways to address the underlying grievances that fuel the conflict. Section 9. Conclusion. A dangerous game of cat and mouse. The recent explosions in Iran are a stark reminder of the dangerous game of cat and mouse being played out between Israel and Iran. The two countries are locked in a shadow war, fueled by deep mistrust, ideological differences, and geopolitical competition. The explosions have exposed Iran's vulnerabilities and raised fears of a wider conflict. While neither side appears to want a full-blown war, the risk of miscalculation and escalation remains high. The international community must act urgently to prevent further escalation. Diplomatic efforts must focus on reducing tensions, restarting negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, and finding ways to address the underlying grievances that fuel the conflict. The stakes are incredibly high. A wider conflict between Israel and Iran would have devastating consequences for the entire Middle East and beyond.